guys, how are you all? I hope you all are doing well. I am Rupal Gupta and in this video I'll be taking you through the phenomena of zeta potential and electrodouble layer. Let's get on with it. To learn about zeta potential, one must have a clear idea about what electrodouble layer is. Because electrodouble layer is the basis of existence of zeta potential. So we'll see what electrodouble layer is and how it is formed. Initially, we'll take a setting in which we are having a solution. We all know that solution has two parts, that is solute and solvent. In this solution, there is insoluble particles are there. Some insoluble particles are present as solute, which are making it a solution. So just suppose we have added this particle to this solvent and it will form a solution with it. But the prerequisite for the electrodouble layer here is that this particle must be insoluble in this solvent. You may ask, what will happen if this particle is soluble in the solvent? Then you will be studying about Nernst potential, not zeta potential. For zeta potential to exist, the particle must be insoluble. So when you put this particle in this solvent, there something will happen. It will be the acquiring of charge by the particles. How these particles are acquiring the charge? There are three ways for it to happen. First one is simple adsorption. Simple adsorption of charge on this particle. Second way is ionization of functional group. And the third one is difference in dielectric constant. So, coming to the first one, we'll see all these in detail. Coming to the first one, adsorption. It is, as the word already suggests, it is simple. It means the charge is just coming and sitting on the surface of the particle. Suppose if this particle is inherently having positive charge, so it will attract some negative charge to sit on the surface of it. This is called adsorption of charge on particle. Second one is ionization of functional group. So as I've already stated, the prerequisite for zeta potential to happen is insolubility of particle. Here you see that this functional group, whatever this particle will be carrying, this functional group should also be insoluble in the water or in your solvent. By insolubility, I mean it can be partially ionizable. Coming to the first one, that is adsorption. It simply means sitting of the charge on the surface of the particle. Just imagine this particle having its own inherent weak charge, maybe positive or negative. Let's take it positive. It is having its own inherent some weak positive charge. So it will be attracting negative ions to sit on its surface. This simply means adsorption of ions. Now you may have a question that from where these ions are coming. These ions are already present in this solvent. These ions can be sodium, chloride negative, Na positive or Cl negative, anything like that. So these are already present in the solvent. Next one is ionization of functional group. As I already told you, functional group should not be soluble in the solvent. It should be partially ionizable. Here, let's take an example of acidic functional group, that is COOH. This is the second one I'm explaining. COOH. When it comes in contact with water or when it comes in contact with solvent, COOH will be ionized into COO negative and H positive. These are the ions. Now you see this COO ion, that is like this one is not something separately, we are not studying it separately. This is the functional group of this particle. So this particle is now having COO negative. This makes this particle to have net negative charge. So now this particle has net negative charge. This is how the particle will acquire charge, that is the negative charge, by means of ionization of functional group. Third one is difference in dielectric constant. We know that the particle and the solvent as well has its own dielectric constant. The difference in the values of these, the dielectric constant of these two, will be imparting a charge on the particle. But here we are mainly seeing how this adsorption and ionization of functional group will be doing their functions, how the particle will acquire charge through these two ways mainly. So let's proceed with the formation of electrodouble layer. Let's see how electrodouble layer is formed. As we have seen this particle, just assume this particle to have an inherently negative charge. It's having some inherent negative charge. Now it will acquire some charge from the solvent. Because it's having its own negative charge, now what kind of charge it will be acquiring? It will attract positive charge. Now this positive charge which is being attracted from the solvent will be covering whole surface of this particle. What do you think the next step will be? Of course, there will be the acquiring of negative charge on this positive charge, because now there is net positive charge on this particle. So some negative ions will be coming and will be sitting on the surface of already present positive charge. You see some negative charge sitting on positive charge. Again, because here is negative, it will try to attract some more positive charge from the solvent. So some more positive charge will come. But this time, the positive charge which is being attracted will be a lot less, like it will be the attraction of positive charge on the negative one will be, the extent of it will be a lot less than what it was initially in this layer. Why is it happening? Because this positive charge which is already covering the surface of this particle is having some repulsion towards incoming positive charges. So what will happen here? The positive charge which is coming now, it's a lot lesser than what came in the starting. You see some kind of layer forming here. You see some kind of layer forming here. Let's name it A. Let's name this layer A. Also, it can be named as tightly bound layer. Tightly bound layer. And you may ask me why you are naming it tightly bound layer. Because whenever you try to move this particle now, this layer will be moving along with this particle. Just imagine this tip of this marker to be the particle, and this cap sitting on the tip of the marker is tightly bound layer. When I try to move this marker here and there, this cap, that is tightly bound layer, will also move along with it. So we are naming it tightly bound layer here. This A layer can also be known as shear plane. I'll tell you why it is known as shear plane. Now you see this net charge on this tightly bound layer is positive. What will happen now? Of course, it will be attracting some negative ions towards it. After coming off these negative ion, again the same process will be there. Positive charge will come and then negative charge again. So like something like this will be formed. Again, after positive charge, negative charge, you can see some positive charge is coming back. You see this layer, again one more layer is forming here. You name it B. And this layer which is formed here is known as shearing layer or stern layer. Shear layer or Stern layer. Why is it called this shear layer? I'll tell you. Because we've already learned what is tightly bound layer. It will move along with particle, but this shear layer is kind of shearing on the surface of the tightly bound layer. It's not that tightly bound to the particle, it's kind of loosely bound, and when the particle moves, this shear layer is some kind of wiggling on the tightly bound layer. It's moving, it keeps on moving, and when you try to move this particle a lot in a faster pace, this shearing layer will also be broken. But when the particle stabilizes again, this shearing layer will be formed again. You must note that because this shear layer is sitting on tightly bound layer on this A, this is also called as shear plane. Just because this shearing layer is sitting on this A layer. Now let's see what will have to happen after this B layer. There will be equal acquiring of both positive and negative charges. What I mean to say is that now this positive and negative, both the charges are in same quantity, they are sitting on this B layer. What do you think now will happen? What will be the net charge? The net charge will be neutral. It will be 0. Because this net charge is 0, we name this layer as electroneutral region. Just because there is 0 charge on that layer. Let's see, this finishes your electrodouble layer. Now we'll see what is zeta potential. So just by the name potential, first of all you need to know what is potential. Potential in simple words means the difference in the net electrical charge, the difference between the net charge of point A and point B. Just imagine there are 2 points and you take these 2 points, there is some charges there on this point, some charges there on this point. The difference between both of these charges is called as potential difference. So zeta potential is the potential difference between point A, layer A and layer B. You can also say that zeta potential, I'll write it here. Zeta potential is potential difference between layer A and layer B. Here layer A was tightly bound layer and layer B was electroneutral region. Now you may think where this zeta potential is used. Zeta potential mainly comes into play in case of suspensions and colloids. You know what colloids are. Colloids are the systems which contain the solute which is in nano size. If the size of the particles in colloid exceeds nano range, it won't be called as colloid anymore. Colloids being the systems having nano range sized particles in them, they need to have a higher zeta potential just to keep them suspended so that these particles would not come a lot closer to each other and they don't settle down. For colloids, it is important for them to have high zeta potential. I'll tell you why. Just suppose there are two particles, particle 1 and particle 2. If they are having high zeta potential, if the zeta potential is high, the repulsion capacity of this particle will be a lot higher. That means if this particle is in a certain distance with this particle, like they are in a larger distance, they will still be able to repel each other. They don't need to come closer to have some kind of repulsion. Like there will be larger distance, there will be if there is larger zeta potential, these two particles will be repelling each other in higher distance, in longer distance. So they will not come closer to each other. Whereas, just take an example of particle 3 and particle 4. Here zeta potential is very less, or you can say it's just less. Here zeta potential is less. So what's happening? Particle number 3 and particle number 4 are coming somewhat closer and then having some kind of repulsion. They are still moving away from each other. They are not forming any clump or anything, but they are having less zeta potential, so they are coming closer and then having some kind of repulsion. This is the basis because of which colloids must have high zeta potential. Now we know that suspensions are of two types. Those two types are flocculated and deflocculated suspensions. In case of deflocculated suspension, you notice a similar kind of situation as it was in colloids, because here also deflocculated means the particles in this system are not being a lot closer. They are not forming aggregates. What does floccules means? It means aggregates. So in deflocculated systems, the particles are remaining independent. To keep them independent and keep them suspended in the system, these kind of systems must have the particles which will possess high zeta potential. As I have already explained you, when high zeta potential will be there, the particles of these deflocculated systems will be repelled to a larger distance. So they will not come together and they will not form a clump. So like simply the suspension will remain stable just because of high zeta potential. Whereas in case of flocculated suspension, this kind of system needs the particles to be in aggregates, to be in floccules, somewhat like this. So here the zeta potential must be lesser, so that they remain as floccules. Still stay away from other floccules, but they will remain as floccules, so they need to have less zeta potential. I would like to add one thing here. We know that colloids are of two types, lyophilic and lyophobic. I told you that as in deflocculated system, colloid also must have high zeta potential for higher stability. It's more important, it's especially important in case of lyophobic colloids. Why? Because lyophobic colloids, as you know, they are not solvent loving, so they should be remaining suspended in the solvent with the help of higher zeta potential. It will cause the repulsion between the particles, and then lyophobic colloids will be made stable. In case of lyophilic colloids, there is a sheath of liquid surrounding the particles. There is some kind of sheath of the solvent or liquid surrounding the particles, which keeps them stable, which keeps the colloid system stable. With this, I finish this video. If you have any suggestions for me, feel free to leave a comment, and if you like this video, share it with your friends. Thank you for watching.